What is compost tea?
What
is it? What is it? For the gardener out there that keeps hearing compost tea, they picture compost. They got compost outdoors. I'm taking my eggshells, I'm taking my banana peels, I'm making my compost.
Right.
What is compost tea?
Well, compost tea used to be, old school farmers will tell you this, where it would actually be an anaerobic infusion, where you would take your digested humus, the stuff that comes out of your compost bin after the microbes in the compost pile have broken it down into a humus for your soil. And what they would do is they would steep that just in water and let it sit there and then feed it to the plant. What is now known as compost tea is actually technically AACT, actively aerated compost tea, which is again a solution of compost where you put it in water, but you aerate the water. And when you aerate the water, you activate the organisms that are in the compost, and they start to multiply from all this oxygen being fed to them in an aqueous environment. Now you've created what would be the modern day version of what is compost tea, which is a probiotic infusion of literally billions of beneficial microorganisms, both bacterial and fungal, which can then be fed to soil. And they will then work with the soil as a home base, as a condominium, as a hotel, in which to fire on all cylinders in which to communicate with each other, in which to break down the food sources that are in the soil, render salts that are in the soil less harmful and more bioavailable as food sources to the roots of your plant, optimize the plant's immune system, basically populate your whole soil media base with a probiotic infusion similar to populating the intestine in your own body with an excellent multicultured, Bulgarian yogurt or something.
Stretch. I know a lot of gardeners have been told that compost tea can make their plants stretch. Can you shed some light on that for us, Josh?
I have heard that of other tea recipes making your plants stretch. To my delight, I'm able to report to you that with Boogie Brew, we've never seen that characteristic. Far from it. We've seen, just more and more and more new nodes coming out and decreasing the internodal growth. And for us, back in the day, in the glory days when we were growing, we used to have to constantly go in there and super crop our plants because so much new green material was growing on the stem. If you start adding too much of a nitrogen-rich compost, then you're going to, a compost that's had too much of the green matter fed to it and not enough carbon, then you're probably going to end up with a tea that also is going to create some stretching in your plants. So be careful. Use the sources. Research your humus. Research the compost, the facility, or how you're creating it, Again, it's about the tea reflecting the right carbon to nitrogen ratio, which we believe should be 75 to 25%. That means 75% carbon, 25% nitrogen. So, a lot of people, they'll buy Boogie and they'll start to experiment. They'll add more carbon, they'll add a bunch of biochar, or they'll add more nitrogen food sources. Don't. We've already perfected it. We're really happy with our recipe. I can only guarantee Boogie Brew working to its desired effect and its full potential if you don't really change the recipe too much, if you can just use it for what it is, which is, in my humble opinion, the world's greatest compost teas. Now, if you have tea recipes that you want to experiment with and use Boogie as a base for, please go ahead and do so. Well, the other tea blends that are on the market are relatively monodimensional. They rely on a few good sources of humus and vermicompost, and then sell their blend, which could be as little as just one vermicultural extract from worms, or it could be a combination of a few ingredients that you're invited to add yourself to a hummus that they give you, and a like a biological activating ingredient like a sugar source that they give you, and some maybe some kelp that you then put together yourself into your own tea recipe. Well, I guess what makes Boogie Brew really unique is that It's a complex product that comes to you all in one, as a one-stop shop bulk granola, right there in this, even the, you know, the cereal style packaging. This packaging is very important. The organisms that are in the dried tea mix get to continue to breathe, to off gas, and it allows them to expire their off gases and not build up ammonia levels in the packaging that would otherwise render it an anaerobic environment and destroy the life forms that are actually in the tea mix. So what you get with Boogie is, you know, like I keep saying, I'm famous for it, but it's a one-stop shop compost tea and fertilizing food source all in one recipe. And we even give you the burlap bags, you know, with the tea. We believe in burlap because it's completely natural. There's no petrochemicals that have been infused into this burlap. We found a burlap manufacturer who doesn't use any, you know, nasty chemical resins. And you just take one handful, literally just a dry cup of our tea, and you pour it into the burlap bag. I should have brought a little cup container, but I'm just going to take a couple of handfuls of this tea and put it in the bag, and there you go. You're good to go. You've got your tea bag. Now, who needs more flexibility than that? Because this bag, that right there was already a cup, just about, which will make 5 full-strength gallons.
Just throw your air stone right in the bag.
Yeah, you can also throw your air stone. If you're only going to use one air stone, if you're going to be lazy like me and only use one air stone, then actually don't put it in the bag. Just if it's a small amount of tea to begin with, put the air stone in the bucket. And then, you know, if it's a small amount of tea, it'll breathe just fine. Now, once you start using more tea to get a stronger extract, even if you're only doing it in a 5-gallon bucket, but you're trying to make, say, as much as 50 gallons of full-strength Boogie in one bucket, you know, with one bag, then yes, it would be ideal to add an extra air stone, put it inside the bag, and allow the big pillow, if you want to call it, of tea to breathe better. Plus an additional air stone. Always important to have that one air stone at least in the water reservoir which you're infusing the tea.
Okay. What is the maximum potential of the product? So if somebody was to try and use this product for every water feeding, what kind of customer would they be?
They would be an organic connoisseur, Ryan, and they'd also be a very smart grower because they would know that ultimately when you pour nothing but life into your soil, your final product quality is going to reflect that which you gave it. Remember, we're not just what we eat, we're what we absorb. When you put nothing but high bioactive agents, you know, highly biologically active agents into your soil and increase its life all the time, the soil is going to absorb whatever else you feed it. The plants are going to absorb whatever else you feed them more cleanly. Everything is going to be more efficient, and their final end produce will have achieved its maximum genetic potential. Now, if someone wants to go so OCD on the tea, believe me, I've done it, that they're feeding it all the time to their soil, that's fine. It will not hurt their plants, provided they practice what I call the 9/11 rule, which is test the runoff coming out of your soil, coming out of one of your pots or a designated area of your garden. And if it's coming out above 1100 parts per million, you know, you shouldn't feed it full strength tea. Maybe go 1 to 5, you know, a few hundy, 400 or 500. If it's coming out below 1100 parts per million, below 900 parts per million, you could feed it up to 11. If it's coming out below 1100, between 9 and 11, you could feed it another 900. I mean, basically, try to keep it where the rule is you're never feeding it more than what it would take for the soil to be at 2000 parts per million. So in the early stages, don't overdo it. You know, dilute the tea more. Less is more in the early stages. And then as it gets more, yes, you can get more aggressive with it. It is, after all, a phosphorus-rich tea. We use a lot of nutritional yeast in it, brewer's yeast. That's a very good bioactive form of phosphorus for your plants. Also has a lot of B vitamins in it. And so all it will do is make your flowers better, provided you're relying on the tea to be your fertilizer and you're not introducing other things. Now, if you're using other food sources, whatever they may be, including what we recommend, which is occasional intelligently applied top dressings to your soil, or other organic fertilizer-only teas, or hydroponic nutrients that are mildly fed, then Don't overdo the tea. Do it diluted. A couple of times a week, 1 to 10. You could do it every day, but not at full strength. Not because the tea by itself will really hurt your plants, but because it's going to vastly increase the assimilation of the other foods that you feed the plants. It's going to make the plants so much more metabolically efficient. They're just going to absorb whatever other foods you feed them. The whole idea behind the tea is to allow you, the end user, the customer, the farmer, to obtain the maximum usage, and efficiently utilize the other food sources that you're investing your valuable grow dollars in.
And here with synthetics versus organics, there's a two totally different world, right?
Yes.
With organics, you're actually measuring the food with that type of measurement, whether it's ppm, TDS, or EC. With synthetics, you're actually measuring the salt catalyst. So when you're talking parts per million, and we're talking with organics, you are always able to get a higher threshold for the plant versus synthetics, where you're measuring a lot of salt, and the threshold for the parts per million or the TDS or EC is always going to be lower. So when Josh was talking about 2,000, in the organic world, yes, the plants aren't living in a bunch of salt, so they can have all that food that they're living with in the soil, where with hydroponics, obviously you're going to typically go with a slightly lower ppm because you're measuring mostly salt, not food.
Sure, absolutely. Like, excuse me, Ryan, thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, like in an aeroponic system, a DWC, I mean, 2,000 is getting up there. That stuff is going to be
you're measuring,
pretty potent.
Yeah, you're measuring pretty much a bunch of salt, basically, not a bunch of food. So for those guys that are in the synthetic world, you're obviously going to be your goal is going to be a little bit less of a parts per million than the guy that's in the organic world. Also, the assimilation of the nutrients, as he told you, if you're a higher ppm, be aware, even organic guys, that this is going to awaken the feeding process of the plants. So, as Josh said, if you're measuring a runoff that's really high, even with organics, you definitely want to use a lower regimen of the tea, like the 1 to 10.
Well, foliar, I found that the ideal boogie seems to be 1 to 5.
Okay.
So, if you brew a gallon and you want to make yourself 5 gallons of spray, that's a very efficient use of tea. You could go stronger, but you don't really need to. We're trying to give you the maximum value here, and you will see dramatic results when you do it 1 to 5, because what you're doing by keeping it somewhat stronger as a foliar agent is you're maximizing the biological army and putting them to good use right there on the leaf. Whereas, I mean, it's not then digesting other food sources on the leaf and rendering them more, so like in the roots, if you do it 1 to 5 and you're also doing it with other products, it's not going to hurt them, but you don't need to. You can keep it at 1 to 10. And use more of it at a higher dilution, whereas less of it and done at a stronger dilution through a spray seems to work really well. It just coats the leaves with massive numbers of beneficial organisms.
So for gardeners that are thinking of possibly taking a compost tea such as Boogie Brew and implementing it into the way that they garden, and they are looking at all the other bottles they feed their plants, they're just seeing it as one other component, know this: unlike something like fulvic or humic acid or even some carbohydrate products where the nutrient company tells you to feed it every week, every watering with your plant, and your plant almost might only need it just certain periods of time, we would love for you to do the Boogie Challenge and actually feed maybe 1 of 2 plants or a set of plants versus another plants in your garden, just specifically with the brew. And if it's easier to do it on the foliar, just to hit some of them with a foliar periodically versus the others, we would really like you to do that test, because you will see a night and day difference in between plant development when using this product versus not using it, unlike a lot of the other supplements that you're feeding to the root zone. So definitely take that challenge, because we have gardeners that come back every day and they will say that it's obviously something that they see right away. It's a big difference to the plant development.
Very dramatic difference. The only thing stronger than the BB, the Boogie Brew, is the BC, the Boogie Challenge. Absolutely, Ryan, you're correct about that. Gardeners are constantly amazed at its effectiveness. It will allow you to achieve horticultural excellence, AGE, achieve gardening excellence, and that's what the tea, it truly is what the title says, allows you to brew your way to a much greener thumb today.
I'm a gardener that already has a very high content food blend, soil mix or cocoa mix could I maybe not use my liquid fertilizers so much and just rely on Boogie Brew as a fertilizer?
Yes, you could, if you are willing to, then of course invest in using more tea and doing it not just more frequently, but also doing it at higher strengths. And again, practice the 9/11 rule, read what's coming out of the bottom of your pots before you elect to give them that injection of fertilizing life, not just the world-class biological cocktail of organisms that are in the tea, but also the valuable fertilizing elements that are in the tea. And remember, the cool thing about the fertilizers that are in Boogie Brew is if you do it right, by the time the plant uses them, they're no longer in their original mineral form. In other words, the soy meal has now become, super soy amino acids that have gone through the digestive tract of the microbes. The microbes have literally, it's gone through the guts of the microbes by the time the plant uses it. So it's very efficient.